I never thought I'd reach the day when I'd actually hand over my children to my mother-in-law, Linda. But after years of her constant criticism, I had finally had enough. It started like any other chaotic morning in my household. Except this time, my patience had completely run out. Jacob, my 2-year-old, was sprawled on the couch, looking pitifully pale. His tiny hands clutched his stuffed elephant, his lips quivering as he moaned, "Mommy, tummy hurt." Emily, my 5-year-old, was standing by the couch, her nose scrunched in a mix of disgust and panic. "Mommy, Jacob threw up again." I had barely taken 2 steps toward him when Linda swooped in from the kitchen, like a hawk sensing weakness. "See," she said, her voice dripping with superiority. "This is exactly what I've been talking about, Lisa. You spoil these kids. You let them run wild, eat whatever they want, and now look at him, sick again." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I had heard this speech a million times before. "He has a stomach bug," I said evenly. "The pediatrician said it's going around. It has nothing to do with what he eats." Linda let out a dramatic sigh, folding her arms. "In my day, kids weren't sick every 5 minutes. You coddle them too much. No wonder you're overwhelmed." That did it. That one word, overwhelmed. As if I were incompetent. As if I were failing as a mother. I took a deep breath. I could snap at her, but that would only fuel her argument. Instead, I did something better. I smiled. "You know what, Linda?" I said smoothly. "Why don't you take over for a while?" She blinked. "What? You think I'm doing everything wrong. So why don't you show me how it's done?" I crossed my arms, mirroring her usual stance. "1 full week. You handle everything. Diapers, tantrums, school runs, meal prep, bedtime battles. I'll step back and watch the master at work." Linda's lips parted, but instead of backing down, she smirked. Smirked. As if she truly believed she was about to teach me how to parent my own children. "Fine," she said, lifting her chin. "If that's what it takes to show you how to properly raise children, I accept." Oh, this was going to be good. I turned to my husband, Mark, who had been sitting silently in the kitchen, sipping his coffee like a man watching a dangerous game unfold. He raised an eyebrow at me. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely," I said, grinning. "Linda's been waiting for this moment for years." Linda's smile widened, but she had no idea what she was walking into. "Great," I said. "Starting tomorrow, they're all yours." And with that, I sat back, eager to watch the show unfold. The next morning, I woke up naturally, not to a screaming child, not to the sound of toys being thrown, not to the dreaded beeping of an alarm clock. It was the first morning in years that I had been able to just wake up. Stretching luxuriously, I took my time climbing out of bed. Normally, I'd be rushing to get Jacob changed, making sure Emily was up for school, preparing breakfast, and trying to function on minimal sleep. But not today. Today Linda was in charge. I made my way downstairs, casually dressed in my robe, and walked into what looked like a war zone. Jacob sat in his high chair, his face smeared with something orange. Probably the mashed-up banana Linda had attempted to feed him. His little fists were sticky, and judging by the state of the tray, at least half of his breakfast was on the floor. Emily was at the dining table, arms crossed, a deep scowl on her face. "I don't want eggs. I want pancakes." Linda stood at the stove, looking exhausted. Her usually pristine blonde bob was frizzed at the ends, and she had a smear of something suspiciously resembling baby food on her sleeve. She turned to Emily, exasperated. "You need a proper breakfast," Linda insisted, her voice laced with impatience. "In my day, kids ate what was put in front of them." Emily jutted out her chin stubbornly. "Well, in my day, I eat pancakes." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "Emily, eat your eggs," Linda snapped. Emily huffed and slid down her chair in protest. "No." Linda turned to me for support, but I simply raised my eyebrows. "You're in charge, remember?" She inhaled sharply, then turned back to Emily. "Fine. No pancakes, no breakfast." Emily glared. "Fine." She hopped off her chair and stomped to the living room. Linda groaned and rubbed her temples. "This is ridiculous." I smiled sympathetically. "She likes choosing her own breakfast. If you had asked, she probably would have settled for cereal or toast." Linda huffed. "You let her make too many decisions. That's why she's so stubborn." I smirked. "She gets that from both sides of the family." Linda ignored my comment and turned back to the stove, stirring something half-heartedly in a pan. I could tell she was already worn out, and it wasn't even 8 a.m. yet. Then from behind us, Jacob let out a loud, unmistakable grunting sound. Linda turned just in time to see the look of pure concentration on his tiny face. Her eyes widened in horror. Oh no. He's pooping. I finished helpfully. She recoiled, then glanced at me. Well. I raised my hands. You're in charge, Nana. Time for a diaper change. Linda paled slightly but straightened her shoulders, determined. How hard can it be? Oh, she had no idea. The diaper change from hell. Jacob was in full toddler mode, squirmy, giggly, and completely uncooperative. Linda laid him on the changing table, carefully unfastening his onesie like he was made of glass. Hey, sweetheart. Let's get you cleaned up. The moment she opened the diaper, I saw her face change. Pure, unfiltered horror. Oh, she gagged. Lisa. This is unnatural. I leaned casually against the doorframe. You get used to it. Jacob took advantage of her distraction. He flipped. Linda gasped, trying to hold him down, but he wiggled like a slippery fish, giggling as he grabbed at her hair. Hold still, she screeched, struggling to keep him in place. Jacob cackled and, in one swift motion, kicked the dirty diaper off the table. Linda screamed. The diaper landed. Face down. On the floor. Silence. Then Linda made a sound I had never heard from her before. Somewhere between a wheeze and a whimper. Why is it like this? She whispered, looking absolutely shattered. I patted her shoulder. Diapers are an art form. You'll get better. She turned to me, her eyes dead. No one should have to get better at this. I had to fight so hard not to laugh. After much gagging, muttering, and sheer determination, she somehow managed to get Jacob clean and dressed. By the time she was done, she looked like she had aged 5 years. And the day had just started. By 8:30 a.m., Linda was physically trembling as she tried to get Emily ready for school. Come on, Emily. We're going to be late, she said, trying to guide her granddaughter toward the door. Emily, still annoyed about breakfast, crossed her arms. I don't want to wear this dress. Linda sighed. What's wrong with it? I don't like blue today, Emily declared. Linda groaned. Then pick something else. Emily marched upstairs, took her sweet time, and finally came back down wearing a mismatched outfit. A pink tutu, a sparkly purple shirt that said Queen of Sass, and a pair of green socks. Linda's eye twitched. That's what you're wearing? Emily lifted her chin. Yep. Linda looked at me, silently begging for help. I simply shrugged. She likes picking her own clothes. I figured, why fight it? Linda took a deep breath, then forced a tight-lipped smile. Fine. Let's go. She grabbed the car keys, her purse, and Emily's backpack. But the moment she opened the door, Jacob sprinted outside in nothing but his onesie and socks. Jacob and Linda chased him down the driveway, nearly tripping over herself. I stood at the door sipping my coffee. Oh yeah. He does that. She finally scooped him up, panting. How do you deal with this every day? I grinned. Oh, I manage. By the time she strapped Jacob into his car seat and got Emily buckled in, another disaster hit. Jacob started screaming. What now? Linda asked, panicked. I smirked. He hates the car seat. But he has to sit in it. Yep. Linda tried bribing him. Then distracting him. Nothing worked. By the time she pulled out of the driveway, Jacob was howling, Emily was kicking her feet, and Linda looked ready to cry. I watched them drive away, shaking my head in amusement. Day 1 had barely begun. And she already looked defeated. By the time Linda returned from the school run, she looked wrecked. Her usually polished hair was frizzy, her blouse was wrinkled, and her lips were pressed so tightly together they were almost invisible. She shut the front door and leaned against it like she had barely survived a battle. I smiled sweetly from the couch where I was leisurely sipping a cup of tea. How was drop-off? Linda let out a sharp exhale. Your daughter, she began, then stopped herself, gripping the bridge of her nose. Yes. She talks back so much. I stifled a laugh. She's 5. That's kind of what they do. Linda huffed. Not in my house, she wouldn't. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Because I've heard stories from Mark about how he was as a kid. Linda ignored me and waved a hand dramatically. And Jacob screamed the entire drive back. The entire drive. I nodded. Sounds about right. I don't understand, she said, throwing her hands in the air. Why is he so difficult about a car seat? I shrugged. Oh, he hates being restrained. But I usually sing to him. He likes Twinkle Twinkle. Linda shot me a glare. That would have been useful to know earlier. I smiled. You said you wanted to handle everything your way, so I didn't want to interfere. Linda muttered something under her breath and collapsed onto the couch. But before she could even think about resting, Jacob toddled over to her, dragging his sippy cup along the floor. Nanea, he whined, shoving the cup at her. Juice. Linda glanced at me. Does he mean juice or? Oh, he calls everything juice, I said. He probably wants milk. Linda sighed and hauled herself up. Fine. She took the cup and marched into the kitchen, muttering something about spoiled children and parents these days. I sat back sipping my tea waiting. Lisa. I grinned and strolled into the kitchen. Linda was standing by the fridge holding up an empty milk carton like it was a crime scene. Where is the milk? She demanded. Oh, I said, tilting my head. I was going to grab some yesterday, but I figured you'd want the full experience. Grocery shopping and all. Linda stared at me stunned. You expect me to? I cut her off. Oh, and you'll have to take Jacob with you. I usually shop with him. Her face paled. You mean, take a toddler to the store? I gave her an innocent smile. You did say I coddle them too much. You're in charge now. Linda opened her mouth to argue, but then she shut it, her pride getting in the way. She straightened her shoulders. Fine. I'll handle it. Oh, this I had to see. 20 minutes later, I watched from the front porch as Linda buckled Jacob into his car seat. He was already whining about it. Linda turned to me. He'll be fine. I'll be back soon. I smiled. Of course. Have fun. She drove off, looking confident. I gave it exactly 10 minutes. Then my phone rang. I answered casually. Hello. I can't do this. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. What happened? He grabbed everything. I turned my head for 1 second and he had a jar of pickles in his hands. Then he threw a bag of flour on the floor. And when I tried to take a candy bar from him, he screamed like I was kidnapping him. I could picture the entire disaster so vividly. What do I do? She begged. I smirked. I don't know, Linda. You always said parenting was about being firm. Maybe just tell him no. I did, she snapped. Then he laid on the floor and refused to move. Oh, the classic grocery store tantrum. Jacob's signature move. Well, I said casually, you've got 2 choices. Pick him up and carry him out or bribe him. Bribe? She echoed, horrified. I shrugged. A cookie usually does the trick. Linda let out a noise of pure frustration. This is ridiculous. I checked the clock. Oh, by the way, you should probably hurry. You have to pick Emily up from school in an hour. The silence that followed was golden. You're telling me, she said slowly, that I have to feed this child, clean up the mess he made in my car, and then go straight to the school to pick up the other one? Yup, I said cheerfully. A long, defeated sigh. Then, I'll call you back. I set my phone down and laughed. By the time Linda got home, she looked like she had lived 1,000 lifetimes. Her hair was a mess, her blouse had what looked like chocolate smudges, and she smelled faintly of pickles. Jacob was on her hip, looking very pleased with himself, happily munching on a cookie. Emily hopped out of the car, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Nana said a bad word in the parking lot, she announced. Linda closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I bit my lip. Rough day. Linda carefully set Jacob down, straightened her back, and turned to me. I don't understand how you do this every single day. I smiled. Oh, I manage. By the time evening rolled around, Linda was visibly worn down. Her usual self-assured, slightly condescending demeanor had all but vanished, replaced with a quiet, haunted look. She sat at the dining table, barely touching her pizza, while Emily happily devoured her slice and Jacob smeared sauce all over his cheeks. I casually leaned against the counter, enjoying the sight of my once overbearing mother-in-law wilting under the pressure of full-time parenting. So, I said, biting into a slice, how's the experience so far? Linda slowly lifted her gaze to me, her eyes filled with a deep, unspeakable exhaustion. It's manageable. I smirked. Uh, that's why you ordered pizza. Linda bristled, but before she could snap back, Jacob threw his sippy cup onto the floor with a loud thud and let out a satisfied giggle. Linda flinched. Why does he do that? I shrugged. Because he's two. She groaned, rubbing her temples. I don't remember Mark doing any of this when he was little. I smiled knowingly. Memory is a funny thing. Emily piped up, swinging her legs. Daddy says Nana used to lose her mind when he didn't eat his veggies. Linda gasped. Mark said that. I grinned. Oh, he sure did. Linda muttered something under her breath and took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain her composure. Fine. Maybe children are more difficult than I remember. But I can handle this. I lifted my hands. Oh, I never doubted you. Just then, Jacob yawned loudly and rubbed his eyes. Linda perked up. Ah, finally. Bedtime. I smirked. Oh, you think bedtime is the easy part? Linda frowned. How hard can it be? I just smiled. Go ahead. You'll see. The battle of bedtime. Linda confidently carried Jacob upstairs, while Emily trotted behind, offering completely unnecessary but absolutely hilarious commentary. You have to be very careful, Nana, she said seriously. He hates pajamas. Linda scoffed. Nonsense. He needs to wear them. I followed them up, arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe of Jacob's room, ready to enjoy the show. Linda set Jacob down on the changing table and grabbed his tiny pajamas. All right, let's get you dressed, sweetheart. Jacob stared at her. Linda started with his shirt. Jacob shrieked like he was being abducted. Linda jumped. What in they? Jacob flailed his arms, kicking his legs wildly, twisting like a tiny tornado. Linda stared at me, completely at a loss. What is happening? I sipped my tea. Oh, he hates changing. It's a whole thing. Linda struggled, managing to get one arm through the pajama sleeve. But by the time she got to the other, Jacob had somehow escaped like a slippery eel and was running around the room half-dressed, giggling madly. Linda gasped. Get back here. Emily giggled. Told you. Linda lunged for Jacob, but he was fast. He dove under the crib, wiggling his tiny body into a space Linda definitely couldn't reach. Linda turned to me, panting. Lisa. Yes. Help me. I smiled sweetly. Oh, but you've got this. Linda shot me a death glare. Finally, after an exhausting 5-minute chase, she managed to grab him and wrangle him into his pajamas. She let out a deep sigh of relief. There. Done. I raised an eyebrow. Now you just have to put him to sleep. Linda gave me a confused look. What do you mean? He's tired. He'll fall asleep. I laughed. Oh, Linda. You're adorable. Linda placed Jacob in his crib and patted his back. Good night, sweetie. Jacob blinked up at her. Then with a dead serious expression he said, water. Linda frowned. What? I smirked. Oh, he always asks for something to stall bedtime. Linda sighed but grabbed a small cup of water and handed it to him. He took a sip. He tucked him in again. Jacob blinked. Cuddle. Linda hesitated, then sat on the edge of the crib and patted his back. There. She stood up to leave. Nana, Jacob whined. Linda turned around slowly, eyes narrowing. What now? Jacob smiled sweetly. One more cuddle? Linda clenched her jaw. Emily snickered. Mommy usually stays and sings to him. Linda let out a deep sigh. Fine. A song. She started singing a lullaby. Jacob yawned, his eyelids fluttering shut. Linda tiptoed toward the door. Just as she reached it, Jacob's eyes snapped open. Nana, he whispered ominously. Poop. Linda's whole body tensed. I bit back a howl of laughter. Emily cackled. Oh, you have to change him again. Linda turned to me, eyes filled with betrayal. I thought you said he went earlier. I shrugged. Kids are unpredictable. Linda groaned and dropped her head against the doorframe. I patted her shoulder. Welcome to parenting. By the time Linda finally got Jacob to sleep, it was almost 10. She dragged herself downstairs and collapsed onto the couch, her entire soul drained. I sat beside her, sipping my tea. She closed her eyes. Lisa. Yes. Her voice was hoarse with exhaustion. I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. She sighed, rubbing her face. I thought you were exaggerating. I thought you were just making excuses for not having a perfectly run house. I grinned. And now? She let out a weak laugh. Now I know you're a damn superhero. I chuckled. You still have 6 more days. Linda whimpered. I leaned back, smirking. Maybe tomorrow you can teach Jacob the proper way to behave? Linda groaned. Lisa. Not. But. Word. I laughed. Round 1. Complete victory. But the week had just begun. The next morning I awoke to the sound of pure chaos. Jacob's shrill cries echoed through the house, followed by Emily's frustrated voice. Nana. He won't let me brush his hair. I stretched luxuriously in bed, enjoying the fact that, for once, I didn't have to be the one scrambling around before sunrise. Instead, I strolled to the hallway and leaned against the railing, watching the show unfold. Downstairs, Linda stood in the middle of the living room, hair disheveled, wearing a robe that looked like it had seen better days. In one hand she held a hairbrush, in the other a sippy cup. Jacob sat cross-legged on the floor, scowling, his golden curls a tangled mess. Emily, already dressed in her school uniform, folded her arms. You have to chase him, Nana. That's what Mommy does. Linda's face twisted. Chase? This is ridiculous. He needs to sit still. I smirked. How's the morning routine going? Linda whipped her head toward me, eyes bloodshot. Lisa. This is impossible. I sipped my coffee. Oh, but you knew better than me, remember? She exhaled sharply. All right, fine. Mornings are harder than I thought. I chuckled. You haven't even gotten to breakfast yet. Linda narrowed her eyes. What's wrong with breakfast? It grinned. Oh, you'll see. The breakfast battle. 10 minutes later, the dining table looked like a war zone. Jacob refused to eat anything that wasn't shaped like a dinosaur. Emily wanted pancakes, but only the ones I usually made, and Linda stood frozen, spatula in hand, looking completely lost. Emily groaned. Nana, this is burnt. Linda frowned at the pancake on Emily's plate. It's a little crispy, but it's still edible. Emily wrinkled her nose. Mommies are fluffier. Jacob, meanwhile, was on his third demand. Cookie. Linda rubbed her temples. You can't have cookies for breakfast. Jacob banged his tiny fists on the table. Cookie. I leaned against the counter, watching with amusement. You might want to compromise before he stages a rebellion. Linda sighed and tried to offer him some fruit instead. He shoved the plate away. No. I bit back a laugh. And this is why I give him dinosaur-shaped pancakes. Linda turned to me, clearly on the verge of screaming. Do they ever just listen? I snorted. No. Welcome to parenthood. Linda groaned and finally caved, grabbing a cookie and handing it to Jacob. He beamed in triumph. Emily gasped. Mommy never gives him cookies for breakfast. Linda threw her hands up. Oh well, excuse me. I'm just trying to survive here. I laughed. Only 5 more days to go. Linda shot me a murderous look. The final day. By the time the week was over, my mother-in-law, Linda, was a broken woman. She arrived at my doorstep on the final evening, dark circles under her eyes, her normally well-coiffed hair disheveled, and her once pristine outfit covered in unidentifiable stains. Jacob clung to her leg, humming the theme song from Paw Patrol, while Emily skipped beside her, chattering away about how Nana did her best but Mommy does it better. Linda handed me the diaper bag, her movements slow and mechanical. Take them. Take them now. I bit back a laugh. Oh. You don't want to stay another week? Maybe a month. Linda leveled me with a deadly glare. Don't push your luck. We stepped inside and Linda collapsed onto my couch like a woman who had survived a war zone. I watched as she exhaled deeply, eyes closed, as if she were mentally purging the past 7 days from her soul. Lisa, she said, voice hoarse. I don't know how you do it. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Oh. But I thought I was doing everything wrong. She cracked one eye open and scowled. You set me up. I raised an eyebrow. I warned you. You thought I was exaggerating. Linda groaned, rubbing her temples. I was so wrong. These children, they're tiny demons. Jacob, still attached to her leg, suddenly perked up. Nana, can I have a cookie? Linda's eye twitched. No. No more cookies. No more snacks. No more anything. I am done. Jacob blinked up at her, unbothered. Mommy always lets me. Linda pointed a trembling finger at me. I never want to hear the words "Mommy always" again. Emily giggled. Mommy always says that too. I snorted. See? You're already talking like a real parent. A change in Linda. That night after I put the kids to bed, Linda and I sat together in the quiet house, sipping tea. She looked over at me. I know I've been a pain, Lisa. I smirked. That's putting it mildly. She sighed. I just wanted to be involved. And I guess I didn't realize I was being more of a burden than a help. I softened. Linda, I do appreciate that you care. But I need you to trust me. I may not be a perfect mom, but I know my kids. She nodded. I do trust you now. Then she gave me a wry smile. But don't think this means I'll stop giving advice. It's just, now I know when to shut up. I raised my cup. I'll drink to that. As we clinked our mugs together, I knew one thing for sure. She would never question my parenting again. Mission accomplished. The unexpected offer. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a remarkable change in Linda. For the first time since I had married into her family, she no longer hovered over me with unsolicited parenting advice. She no longer pointed out when Jacob refused to eat his vegetables or when Emily threw a tantrum over mismatched socks. She no longer compared my methods to how she had raised her children. Instead, she simply observed. One afternoon, as I wrestled Jacob into his jacket before heading out, Linda sat on the couch, sipping tea. Normally, she would have chimed in with something like, "Back in my day, kids didn't argue about wearing coats." But today she just smirked and said, "He's a stubborn one, isn't he?" I chuckled, fastening the last button. "You have no idea." She sighed. "Oh, trust me. After that week, I have plenty of ideas." A few days later, something happened that nearly made me fall off my chair. I was in the kitchen attempting to cook dinner while keeping an eye on Jacob, who was determined to dump an entire box of cereal onto the floor. Linda, who had been reading a book at the table, suddenly set it down and cleared her throat. "Lisa." I turned, raising an eyebrow. "Yes." She hesitated. "I know I swore I'd never babysit again, but if you ever need a break, I wouldn't mind watching them for a few hours." I blinked. "Excuse me." She shifted in her seat. "Not for a week, obviously. But maybe for a night or two if you and Mark ever want some time alone." I put down my spoon and stared at her. "Who are you and what have you done with my mother-in-law?" Linda chuckled. "Parenting isn't about being perfect. It's about doing your best and knowing when to pick your battles." I gave her a warm smile. "You really get it, huh?" She sighed dramatically. "Lisa, after surviving a week with those two, I could be sent into battle and come out unscathed." I laughed. "Now that's the spirit." And with that, peace was finally restored.